When I took that logging job in the Yukon, they warned me about 6 rules, but nobody said what happened if you broke one. On my very first night, something stood outside my cabin, calling my name, using a voice it shouldn't have known. And that was
You
the
follow
moment
these
I
rules
realized
exactly,
this job wasn't about
or you
logging.
won't survive
It was
the
about
winter.
survival. I should warn you before I begin. What happened in the Yukon was not a story I ever planned to tell, not because I'm scared of being judged, but because even now, years later, I'm not sure I fully understand everything that happened. I can only say this. The moment I stepped out of my old Subaru and into that clearing, the part of me that believed in normal life, in safe jobs and predictable people and ordinary forests, died quietly without me noticing, and something colder, sharper, and more alert took its place. The first thing I remember is the silence. Not peaceful silence, the kind that wraps itself around your ribs and tightens, the kind that tells you you've crossed into a place where something is watching. I had been driving 16 hours straight, a blur of frostbitten highways and empty gas stations, chasing the kind of job only people out of options take. I kept telling myself that this job would be a fresh start, that a few months of hard physical labor deep in the Yukon wilderness would give me the reset I needed. But as I rolled into the gravel lot of the Timberline North Camp, every instinct inside me whispered the same message. Turn around. My name is Avery, 34, broke, educated in all the wrong ways, and stupid enough to take a job that promised room, board, and hazard pay with no questions asked. But what really jolted me awake wasn't the cold or the long drive. It was the figure I saw standing just inside the tree line as my headlights swept past. A human shape, still, watching, too still. I blinked again, and by the time I cut the engine and stepped outside, the figure was gone. Only the wind moved between the pines. If that had been the only strange thing, I might have chalked it up to exhaustion. But it wasn't even the strangest part of my first hour in that place. My hands were still trembling from the drive when a door slammed nearby. I turned and saw a man approaching, a broad-shouldered figure with the gait of someone who had spent most of his life hauling equipment. The kind of man who lived and died by practical skills. His beard was silver at the edges, and deep lines carved themselves into his weather-beaten face. He looked like the wilderness had shaped him with its bare hands. "You Avery?" he asked, voice low, steady, carrying a faint French-Canadian drawl. "Yes," I said, though some instinct deep inside me told me not to give him anything more than that. "Name's Malcolm Rourke. I run this place." He studied me for a beat too long, not sizing me up the way a boss does, but the way someone in a survival situation studies a stranger before deciding whether they're a threat, a liability, or something worse. "Long drive by the look of you." "2 days," I said. "I'm ready to work." He didn't return the half-smile I offered. Instead, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. Without a word, he handed it to me. "Before anything else, you memorize these." I unfolded it, expecting safety guidelines, maybe a checklist about bear protocol or chainsaw maintenance. Instead, I found 6 rules typed in bold, each one more unsettling than the last. 1. Do not enter the forest alone after sunset. 2. If you hear your name coming from the tree line, do not respond. 3. Report any object found in or near your cabin that you did not place there. 4. Do not approach or assist anyone seen in the forest after dark. 5. If you see lights moving between the trees at night, remain indoors with curtains closed. 6. Report any violation of these rules immediately to camp management. I read the list twice, then a third time. My throat went dry. "This is a joke, right?" I asked. "Do I look like I'm joking?" Malcolm said. And he didn't. He looked deadly, serious, haunted, almost, like a man who'd watched something he couldn't explain and learned the hard way never to doubt the rules again. The wind shifted behind me, cold enough to bite through my jacket. I felt the forest watching again. "Is this some kind of hazing?" I tried. Malcolm shook his head once, slowly. "You follow the rules. You go home at the end of your contract. You don't follow them, well, Let's just say the wilderness up here doesn't tolerate mistakes. He didn't wait for my response. Instead, he pointed toward a row of small cabins near the tree line. You're bunking in cabin 8. You'll meet your roommate, Lena Torres. She'll show you the basics. Breakfast at dawn. Shift starts at 7. He turned to go, paused, and looked back with an expression I still can't fully describe, somewhere between warning and pity. Avery, he said quietly, there's no shame in walking away tonight. Better to leave with questions than stay and find answers you didn't want. He walked off before I could respond. I stood in the cold until my fingers went numb, the rules trembling in my hand. When I finally forced myself toward the cabins, my boot prints dragged through the thin layer of fresh snow. Halfway there, I glanced over my shoulder, expecting nothing, and caught a shape slipping between the trees again. Tall, human, but moving in a way no human moved. The cabin itself looked normal enough: 2 beds, a desk, a shared shelf. But the woman sitting cross-legged on the bed opposite mine looked up the moment I stepped inside, as if she'd been waiting to see whether I would come or flee. You must be Avery, she said. Her voice was soft but precise. She closed the leather-bound journal she'd been writing in and tucked it neatly beside her. I'm Lena. She was younger than me by a few years, with dark hair in a braid down her shoulder, and eyes that held an intensity I couldn't quite place, like she was always analyzing something you couldn't see. She gave a polite smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. Long drive? She asked. You have no idea. I might, she murmured, glancing briefly toward the window. People only come this far north when they're running toward something or away from something. That struck deeper than she probably intended. I set down my bag and tried to shake the cold from my hands. How long have you been here? 3 weeks. How is it? She paused, then said, quiet. It was the way she said quiet that made my stomach twist. Not peaceful quiet, cautious quiet, watched quiet. Did Malcolm give you the rules? She asked. I nodded. Good, she said. Take them seriously. Why? What's out there? She didn't answer. Instead, she opened her journal again, pen gliding quickly across the page. Whatever she was writing, she didn't want me seeing it. The sun dipped behind the pines, swallowing the last light of day. I was halfway through unpacking when I heard it. A voice, soft, familiar somehow, calling my name from the tree line. Avery. I froze. The voice drifted closer, threading through the cold air as if carried by something that understood human speech but not human warmth. Avery, come here. I need to talk to you. My body moved toward the window on instinct, but Rule #2 screamed in my mind. If you hear your name coming from the tree line, do not respond. Something primal inside me recognized the danger even before my rational mind did. Something was mimicking a human voice, something that wanted me to come outside. I stepped back from the window, pulse thundering. The voice called again, closer, and Lena, who had barely looked at me all evening, whispered without lifting her eyes. Don't answer it. Whatever you do, don't answer. The voice spoke my name one last time, then stopped abruptly, as if cut off mid-breath. That was the moment I realized I was in far deeper trouble than I had understood. And it was only my first night. Before I continue, if you want more true scary stories like this, and trust me, it only gets stranger from here, hit subscribe to support the channel. It genuinely helps me keep bringing these stories to life. I didn't sleep for the first hour after the voice stopped. I kept replaying the sound of it, my name stretched out just slightly too long, the cadence slightly off, like someone who had heard a human say it and was trying to perfect the imitation. Outside the cabin window, the darkness pressed against the glass in a way that made it feel heavier than night should ever feel. The kind of darkness where forms could hide a foot away from you, and you'd never know it. Lena didn't speak again after her whispered warning. She wrote in her journal, head bowed, pen slicing across the page with a precision that was almost aggressive. What she was recording, I had no idea, but every few minutes she would stop writing, tilt her head slightly, as if listening for something in the silence beyond the cabin walls. Each time she did, my skin crawled. Around 10, I finally climbed into bed, keeping one eye on the window. Lena turned off the overhead light, but kept a soft lantern burning on her desk. She didn't seem to intend to sleep anytime soon. I wondered if she ever really did. I was drifting in and out of shallow, restless half-consciousness when 3 knocks came at the door. Not loud, not rushed, measured, intentional. Lena stiffened immediately, pen frozen above her page. I sat up slowly. Another 3 knocks. Same rhythm. I looked at Lena. She shook her head short, quick, urgent. "Don't answer," she whispered. Her voice was firmer this time. No hesitation. "Who would be knocking at night?" I whispered back. She closed her journal, sliding it quietly into the drawer. Her gaze was fixed on the door, her breathing shallow. Then, a voice muffled, male called from the other side. "Avery, it's Malcolm. Need a word." Everything about it felt wrong. The tone, the cadence, the faint distortion under the words, like something speaking through static. It sounded like Malcolm the way an actor could sound like a famous person, close enough to fool you if you weren't paying attention. I swung my feet out of bed, but Lena shot upright, crossing the room in 2 steps. She grabbed my wrist, grip ice cold. "That's not Malcolm," she said. "How do you know?" "Because Malcolm never leaves the main hall after dark. Ever." The voice called again. A little closer, a little clearer. "Avery, open up." The doorknob twitched once. Not enough to turn, just a test. Lena pulled me back, and we both stood there, breath held, listening. After several long seconds, the footsteps faded, slowly, deliberately, like something walking away only because it chose to. I didn't sleep after that. Neither did Lena. Around dawn, she finally whispered, "Breakfast starts in an hour. Pretend nothing happened." "Why?" "Because if you start asking questions too fast, you'll end up like the others." "What others?" She shook her head. "Eat first. You'll need the strength." Her refusal to elaborate only made my anxiety worse. But she wasn't being dramatic. There was something on her face, a tightness around her eyes, that told me she was holding back more than fear. Something like guilt. We walked to the main hall together as morning light crept weakly across the camp. Frost clung to the trees. Our boots crunched in the gravel, and my breath rose in pale clouds. But more than the cold, it was the quiet that bothered me. No generators humming, no workers chatting, no clatter of breakfast prep. Just silence. Malcolm was already inside the hall, hunched over a pot of coffee. He glanced up when I entered, eyes bloodshot but sharp. As Lena peeled away and sat at the table farthest from everyone, he beckoned me over with a motion that made it clear he didn't want to draw attention. "Rough first night?" he asked. "Something was outside our cabin," I said. "Knocking." He didn't react with surprise. No raised eyebrows, no sympathetic frown, no disbelief. Instead, he asked one question. "Did you open the door?" "No." He nodded once, slow and grave, as if confirming I'd passed a test. "That's good. You wouldn't be standing here if you had." He slid a mug of coffee toward me. Strong, bitter, slightly burnt. It steadied my hands. "What was it?" I asked. He looked down at the floor. "Doesn't matter. Not if you follow the rules." I didn't buy that for a second. But something about the way he said it, the fatigue in his voice, the weight in his posture made me realize he wasn't being evasive out of arrogance. He was being evasive out of fear. Fear of what the truth would do to someone new. I carried my coffee to the edge of the hall where Lena sat alone. She didn't look up as I joined her, just wrote a quick note in her journal before closing it. "You tracked the voice," she said. "What?" "I saw your feet shift before the knock. You were going to the window. It's good you stopped." "I wasn't thinking straight," I admitted. "That's what those things count on." "Things," I repeated. "Plural?" She didn't answer. And the silence between us felt heavier than the cold outside. Other workers filtered in slowly. Most looked like typical loggers, broad-shouldered, weather-worn, tough. But even among the seasoned ones, there was a tension in their movements, a stiffness around their eyes. Then there was one worker who broke the pattern entirely. Tall, mid-40s, salt and pepper hair. Clean, precise movements. The kind of man who looked like he'd never missed a day of work in his life. When he sat across from us, he nodded politely. "I'm Elias," he said. "You're the new one." "Avery," I replied. He studied me for a moment, as though assessing how fragile I was or wasn't. "You heard it last night." I didn't bother denying it. "Yeah, you did good staying inside." "What was it?" His expression cooled. "Not my place to say. Just follow the rules." Everyone kept telling me that, but none of them explained why. It was like being handed a weapon for a war no one would acknowledge. I forced myself to eat breakfast, scrambled eggs, toast, bacon, because my body felt like it needed fuel desperately. But my mind was elsewhere, tracing every rule, every warning, every uneasy glance exchanged between the workers. As we finished eating, Malcolm walked to the front of the hall and cleared his throat. "Listen up," he said. "We've got trail maintenance today. Avery, you'll be with Sam Burke." At the mention of her name, the woman on the far right lifted her hand in a cheerful wave. Blonde hair tucked under a knit cap, bright blue jacket, smile loud enough to fill the room. "Hey there," she called. "Hope you're ready to work." Her friendliness was almost aggressive. Too energetic for a place like this. Too practiced. Lena's gaze sharpened subtly. She leaned toward me. "Be careful with Sam," she murmured. "She's been here longer than anyone." What does that mean? But she was already gathering her things, shutting down the conversation with a tight-lipped nod. I didn't know it yet, but this was the moment my second day in the Yukon stopped being about survival and became about something else, something darker, something hidden beneath the soil and the snow and the rules no one dared to question. And Sam Burke would be the one to show me just how deep the danger ran. Sam Burke walked with the kind of confidence that didn't fit this place. She strode across the snowy clearing toward me, swinging her insulated lunch bag like someone heading into a sunny office job instead of an isolated logging camp with rule sheets that read like survival warnings. Her smile flashed bright, almost too bright against the pale Yukon morning. "You ready to break a sweat, Avery?" she asked, clapping her gloved hands together. "Sector 12's a bit of a hike, so hope you drank your coffee." "I drank enough," I said. "Just point me where to go." "Love the attitude," she said, though something in her tone felt rehearsed, like she'd practiced the line in a mirror. "Malcolm says you're a quick study. Let's see what you've got." We headed toward the tool shed, where she handed me a set of loppers and a small axe. She grabbed a brush cutter with a practiced flourish, as if she wanted to make sure I noticed how skilled she was. On the way out, she glanced over her shoulder at the other workers in the hall. "People here can be a little intense," she said lightly. "Just ignore the weird looks. New blood always shakes things up." "Why would they look at me weird?" I asked. Sam shrugged. "You're new, that's enough." But I noticed the way her eyes flicked past me toward Lena, who had paused in the doorway, watching us leave. A flash of tension crossed Sam's expression before she masked it with another bright smile. The trail to Sector 12 wound through dense pines that swallowed most of the morning light. Snow crunched under our boots. The air burned cold in my lungs. After 10 minutes, the camp was out of sight, and the silence deepened into something heavier than the day before. "You slept okay?" Sam asked. "Not really. Yeah. First nights can be rough. This place has a way of messing with your head." She said it casually, but there was an undercurrent there, something she wasn't saying. "You hear anything weird last night?" I asked. "A few owls. Maybe a coyote or two." She laughed, but it was hollow, brittle. "You'll get used to the noises." I almost told her about the knock on the cabin door, the voice calling my name, but instinct told me not to. Sam might have been friendly, but there was something in her cheerfulness that felt curated. "Lena told me to take the rules seriously," I said carefully. Sam slowed her stride. Her breath puffed white in the cold air. "Oh, did she now?" she said, her tone sharpening just slightly. "Lena's thorough. Let's leave it at that. She wouldn't explain any of them. She loves her mysteries." Sam forced another smile. "Don't worry about it. Half the rules are just to keep newbies from wandering off and getting lost. People panic, get turned around. Happens fast out here." "Panic from what?" I pressed. Sam's jaw tightened, just for a heartbeat. Then she clicked the switch on her brush cutter, revving it to life without answering. The rest of the hike was spent in a strained silence that didn't match her earlier enthusiasm. By the time we reached the old trail we were supposed to clear, the sun had climbed higher, revealing long sweeps of untouched snow and pine branches drooping heavy with frost. Sam showed me how to cut low brush and clear branches, her instructions clipped and efficient. For the next hour, the only sounds were the buzz of tools and the crack of wood snapping under pressure. It almost felt normal. Almost. Then something shifted, a soft rustling to our right, too heavy for a squirrel, too deliberate for falling snow. I stopped, axe halfway through a thick branch. You hear that? Sam didn't turn. Ignore it. It sounded close. She exhaled sharply, setting down her brush cutter. Don't feed it attention. Feed what? Sam finally looked at me, her blue eyes sharp and far more serious than before. Rule 1 exists for a reason. The forest feels different after dark because things move the way they're not supposed to. But even in daylight, you don't stare too long at anything that stares back. A cold sensation crept up my spine. Are you saying something is out there? I asked. Everything is out there, she said cryptically. But some things want to be noticed. Before I could press further, she pointed at a section of tangled undergrowth. We need to finish this area before lunch. Let's keep moving. We worked faster than before, our pace bordering on frantic. The rustling faded but didn't disappear completely. More than once, I caught Sam glancing over her shoulder, scanning the tree line. By noon, my shoulders burned and my hands ached, but we had cleared a quarter-mile of trail. Sam called for a break, and we sat on a fallen log, unwrapping sandwiches from foil. I noticed her scanning the snow around us, her fingers twitching like she expected something to appear. Sam, I said quietly, what actually happened to the people who worked here before us? She froze mid-bite, the cheerful veneer cracking just slightly. Why would you ask that? Lena hinted at it. Malcolm warned me. Elias said the others. Who are the others? Sam pressed her lips together. For a moment, she looked like she might tell me something real. Then she smirked, too quick, too forced. Workers quit sometimes, Avery. They get homesick. They underestimate how tough the Yukon is. That's all. That all. Yes, she said firmly, too firmly. So no one's gone missing? I asked. She didn't answer, and her silence said everything. When we finally packed up our tools and turned to head back, Sam paused abruptly. Right at the edge of the trail, half buried in the snow, sat something small and wooden. A carved figurine, 3 inches tall, shaped like a person, arms outstretched, head tilted sideways, almost curious. Just like the one on my windowsill the night before. But this one was older, weathered, darkened, worn by handling. Don't touch that, Sam said sharply. I wasn't going to. She stared at it with an expression I couldn't decipher. Fear? Anger? Recognition? We should go, she said, gripping her cutter tighter. Now, what is it? I asked. But she was already heading back toward camp, her pace brisk, her posture rigid. I followed her, but halfway down the trail, I glanced back. The figurine was gone, no footprints around it, no sign it had ever been there, only smooth, undisturbed snow. By the time we reached camp again, my nerves were raw. The day had taken a shape I couldn't name, a puzzle where every piece was the wrong size. Every answer led to another question, but none of that compared to what waited for me inside the main hall. Malcolm stood with a folded note in his hand. He saw me, motioned me over, and pressed it into my palm without explanation. My office, 7 p.m. Come alone. R.H. Who's R.H.? I asked. Malcolm didn't answer. His jaw clenched. His eyes darted once toward the tree line, then away. The sun was already beginning to set, and I had no idea yet that this meeting would tear open everything I thought I understood about the camp, the forest, and the rules that were supposed to keep me alive. The note burned in my pocket the whole walk back to the cabin. R.H. I didn't know anyone at camp with those initials. Malcolm wouldn't explain it. Sam avoided looking at me entirely, And Lena. She wasn't in the cabin when I returned. Her bed was perfectly made, journal gone, window slightly open despite the cold. I closed it, but the air that hung inside the cabin didn't warm. It felt like the room itself was holding its breath. I sat on my bed and reread the note. My office, 7 p.m. Come alone, R.H. Something about it wasn't just secretive, it felt urgent. As if someone had decided I'd already crossed a threshold I didn't know existed. The clock on the wall read 6:11, 49 minutes until sunset. The camp always changed after the sun dipped. People got quieter. Doors stayed locked, curtains closed, conversations clipped short, like everyone was trying not to draw attention from something outside, something watching. When 6:55 arrived, I slipped on my coat, stepped out into the thinning daylight, and headed toward the main hall. Frost had crusted over the steps, crunching under my boots. The cold bit deep tonight, sharper, more aggressive, as if the forest itself wanted me to feel unwelcome. The main hall door creaked when I pushed it open. Inside, the lights were dim, the tables cleared from dinner. No chatter, no clatter, just the scent of wood smoke hanging in still air. A single lamp glowed under a door behind the kitchen, an office I'd never noticed before. My pulse kicked up as I approached. I knocked twice. "Come in," a voice said, low and steady. I stepped inside. The man behind the desk was in his mid-50s, clean-shaven, wearing a wool sweater and wire-rimmed glasses. He didn't look like a logger. He didn't look like a supervisor. He looked clinical, observant, like someone who had spent a lifetime cataloging human behavior. "You must be Avery," he said. "I'm Rowan Hale, R.H." He motioned for me to sit. The moment I did, he locked the door behind me. That detail alone sent a quiet bolt of alarm through my chest. "I hear you had an eventful first night," Rowan said. "That's one way to put it." He nodded, as if confirming something. "When you heard the voice calling your name, did you feel compelled to answer? A pull? An urge to investigate?" The question startled me, not because he asked about the voice, but because he knew exactly what I'd felt. "How did you know that?" I asked. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he turned toward a large map pinned to the wall. Red markings dotted several points surrounding the camp. Some clustered, some isolated. "These are the areas you worked today," he said. "Sector 12 included." "Why are they marked like that?" I asked. "Because they're active zones." "For what?" He turned slowly. His eyes were sharper now, devoid of the polite warmth he'd offered when I entered. "Avery," he said quietly, "this is not a logging operation." I waited for him to elaborate. He didn't. Instead, he studied my reaction, as if measuring how deep the truth might cut. "I don't understand," I said carefully. "That's the point. No one here is supposed to." He opened a drawer and placed a small device on the table, something that looked like a handheld scanner with a digital readout of fluctuating numbers. "What you encountered last night wasn't supernatural," he said. "It was neurological. A response triggered by environmental factors unique to this region." "You're saying I imagined it?" "No." He leaned forward. "I'm saying something in the forest interacted with your brain. The voice you heard was real. Your urge to respond was real. But its source wasn't human." I felt the cabin door knock again in my mind. The perfect imitation of Malcolm's voice. The almost human cadence. "What's causing it?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Rowan tapped the scanner. "Magnetic anomalies. Naturally occurring electromagnetic fields created by subsurface formations. They influence auditory processing, visual perception, emotional response. In the right conditions, they can induce hallucinations that feel indistinguishable from reality." "Hallucinations don't knock on doors," I snapped. Rowan didn't flinch. "No, they don't." A chill swept across my shoulders. "So what knocked?" I asked. He inhaled deeply, then exhaled through his nose, like a man who had been waiting years for something he dreaded, saying, "There are things in these forests that react to the magnetic fields, just like human brains do. They hear what we hear, feel what we feel, learn what we learn, and some of them adapt. You're telling me something out there is copying us. Not copying, he corrected. Mimicking. My pulse thudded hard. And why is a logging camp researching that? Rowan's jaw tightened. Because this isn't a logging camp. It's a behavioral research station. The logging work is just a cover. I felt the room sway. You're experimenting on people, I said. He didn't deny it. That was worse than anything he could have said. Workers are recruited because they react strongly, he said. New environments, high stress, emotional vulnerability. The fields affect people differently, depending on their psychology. And the rules? I asked. They're not just superstition, they're protocols, he said, developed from previous incidents. Incidents? I echoed. Rowan turned to another chart on the wall, one with dates and names. Names crossed out, not with lines, with red slashes. Unease crept slowly through my ribs. How many people didn't follow the rules? I asked. He didn't turn around. Enough. A faint tapping echoed somewhere in the hall. A pipe, a door settling, or something outside brushing against the siding. Rowan stiffened, listening. You need to leave now, he said suddenly. We shouldn't talk more until I know who else is aware you're here. Why wouldn't they want us talking? Because, he said quietly, someone in this camp is reporting to the corporation, and if they think you're asking questions. He didn't finish the sentence. A knock, sharp, authoritative, hit the office door from the other side. Rowan's eyes widened. That's them, he whispered. How do you know? Because no one knocks on my door at night. The knock came again, louder. Rowan motioned toward the back window. Go, he said. Now, who is it? I whispered. He didn't hesitate. Samantha Burke. The door handle twisted. Go, Rowan said sharply. Before she decides you're worth eliminating. I didn't wait. I slipped through the window into the freezing darkness as Rowan unlocked the office door behind me. And the last thing I heard before slipping into the shadows was Samantha's calm, too even voice saying, Dr. Hale, we need to talk about your visitor tonight. I kept low as I moved through the snow, the cold biting deep enough to numb the exposed skin around my neck. The cabin lights glowed faintly through the trees, but everything else was swallowed by a thick, unnatural stillness. Even the wind had stopped. It was the kind of silence that didn't just surround you, it pressed in, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. I crouched behind a stack of firewood near the back of the main hall, straining to hear what was happening inside Rowan's office. Muffled voices drifted through the frozen air. Samantha's tone was unnervingly calm, the exact opposite of Rowan's tense, clipped responses. Protocol breach, she said. Unauthorized contact. Not part of the approved observation schedule. Observation. Schedule. Every word made my stomach twist tighter. A door shut sharply, followed by the heavy tread of boots moving across floorboards. Samantha was leaving the office. I ducked farther into shadow, heart pounding. Moments later, the back door swung open. Samantha stepped out into the cold, pulling on her gloves as she scanned the camp. Her eyes swept across the snow, lingering for a moment on the faint impressions of footprints. My footprints. I'd tried to brush them out, but fresh snow told more truth than I could hide. Instead of calling out, she simply stared. And the smile that crept across her face wasn't friendly. It was patient, knowing. Like a cat that has seen the mouse, but doesn't feel any urgency to pounce. She turned away, walking toward the workers' cabins with an almost leisurely stride, the kind that said she was in control of the situation, and she knew it. Once she was gone, I exhaled and forced myself to move. The cold stabbed through my coat, but fear pushed me forward. I skirted the camp's edge until I reached my cabin. The window was dark, no light inside. I slipped in as quietly as I could. Lena was already there, sitting on the edge of her bed. Her hair was down, loose around her shoulders, making her look softer, almost fragile. But her eyes were sharp the moment she saw me. "Where were you?" she whispered. "I came back, and you were gone, meeting someone named Rowan Hale." The color drained from her face. You shouldn't have gone to him alone. He left a note in the hall. She shook her head, cursing under her breath. Of course he did. What is he, supervisor? Scientist? I asked. Lena didn't answer. She stood and closed the curtains before lighting the lantern on her desk. Her hands were steady, but only because she forced them to be. What did he tell you? She asked quietly. That this place isn't a logging camp. That electromagnetic fields in the forest cause hallucinations. That the rules are protocols. That people have disappeared because they didn't follow them. Lena's jaw tightened. He told you too much. He didn't tell me everything, I said. There's more, isn't there? She looked at me with something like sorrow. You need to understand none of this was supposed to involve you. Your file said you'd keep your head down. My file? Lena froze, realizing too late what she had just revealed. What file? I pressed. She backed toward her desk, avoiding my eyes. Everyone here has one, she whispered. Your background, your stress profile, your psychological resilience. We're not just studying the forest's effects on people. We're studying which people are most susceptible. Studying us, I said. Experimenting on us. Lena flinched at the word, as if it tasted bitter in her mouth. It's not like that, she tried. It's controlled observation, data collection. No one is supposed to be harmed. Tell that to the people on Rowan's wall, I snapped. The names with red slashes through them. She closed her eyes. Those weren't failures. Those were variables. A chill rolled through me, not from the cold this time. Variables, I repeated. They were people. She sank into her chair, covering her face with her hands. I didn't want to be part of this. I thought I could help regulate the research, keep things safe. But when corporate got involved, footsteps outside cut her off. Slow, purposeful, heavy boots moving across snow. Both of us froze. A shadow moved past the window. Lena's eyes widened. Get away from the door. I did as she said, stepping back just as a soft knock sounded. Not forceful, not urgent, just a quiet, polite tapping that froze the air inside my lungs. Avery, a voice called. It's Elias. Need a word. But the hair on the back of my neck stood on end. That wasn't Elias. Not even close. The rhythm was wrong. The tone was too smooth, too balanced, stripped of any human imperfection. The thing outside spoke again. Avery, need to talk. Its voice was clearer now, but still wrong, like it was reading a script, not speaking from memory. Lena shook her head slowly, eyes wide. Don't respond. The doorknob twitched once, twice. A slow, deliberate testing of boundaries. The same pattern from last night. Back away, Lena whispered. And stay quiet. The voice repeated my name 3 times. Each repetition more precise than the last, as if it was refining the pronunciation in real time. Then, suddenly, it stopped. Silence blanketed the cabin. After a long minute, Lena exhaled shakily and sank down on the bed. That wasn't Elias, I whispered. No, and it wasn't the same thing you heard last night either. My blood ran cold. There's more than one, I said. Lena looked at me with an expression that held too many truths at once. Avery, this forest isn't empty, and the things inside it learn fast. I swallowed hard. If they learn, then they'll figure out how to get us to open the door. That's why the rules exist. But the rules aren't stopping whatever's happening in the camp, I argued. Rowan hinted there's someone in camp working for corporate. And Sam? Lena looked up sharply. Don't trust Sam. I don't. Good, she whispered. Because she's exactly the kind of person the corporation sends when they want control, when they want compliance, when they want people to disappear quietly. My hands tightened into fists. So what do we do? Lena hesitated, then reached slowly into her drawer. When she pulled her hand back out, she held her journal. Thick, filled, worn at the edges. This, she said, placing it in my hands, is everything I've documented since I got here. Patterns, behavior, anomalies, and names. Names? I asked. Of workers who didn't walk away, she said. Workers like Mason. Workers like the ones Rowan marked on his board. And workers who were taken. A cold wave washed over me. Taken by the forest? I asked. She shook her head. No, she said softly. Taken by the camp. Lena's words hung in the air like frost suspended between us, heavy and sharp. Taken by the camp, not the forest. Not hallucinations. Not magnetic anomalies. The camp. I sat with her journal in my hands, the leather worn soft from constant use. The weight of it felt disproportionate for its size, like the truth pressed inside the pages made it denser than paper should ever be. Every instinct in me wanted to open it immediately, but Lena's eyes stopped me. Not here, she whispered. Not until you understand what you're holding. Then tell me, I said. I'm done with half-truths. She looked toward the cabin door, as if expecting someone or something to be listening. Only when the wind rose outside, masking our voices with a low rustling, did she continue. When I arrived, she said softly, I thought I was being hired as a research assistant for environmental studies, behavioral psychology in extreme conditions. That's what the job description said. It wasn't an unusual field. Corporations love using nature as a stress lab. And then I saw the first incident, she said. Her hands tightened around her knees. A worker named Callum. He was smart, observant, too observant. He noticed inconsistencies in the work assignments, the restrictions in certain forest sectors. He questioned why we never revisited specific areas, why we weren't allowed in certain sections of the camp after hours. What happened to him? He disappeared, Lena said quietly. Or, that's the official story. And the real story? They moved him, she said. Relocated, that's their word. He was seen being escorted into the storage hangar behind Sector 9 at dawn. He never came out. A knot formed slowly in my stomach. You think Mason was moved the same way? I said. She nodded. He was smart too. He knew something was wrong here. He started documenting it, snapping photos of equipment, tracking unusual worker assignments, recording audio when he heard voices outside his cabin. The figurines he left weren't warnings. They were markers, breadcrumbs for anyone who might realize the truth. And the camp stopped him. Not the camp, she whispered. The corporation. The camp is just a tool. I felt my pulse thud in my ears. The idea of something crawling through the snow and mimicking voices was terrifying enough. But the thought of human hands orchestrating disappearances behind the scenes that felt colder, sharper, more deliberate. Who in the camp is working for corporate? I asked. Lena hesitated. Her eyes flicked to the window again. Snow fell steadily outside, swirling in the glow from the distant main hall. There are 3 of them, she said finally. I don't know their full list of directives, but I've pieced together enough from behavior, schedules, and communication logs. Who? I asked again, slower this time. She swallowed once. Rowan, Samantha, and someone else I haven't identified yet. The breath left my lungs like I'd been punched. Rowan? I asked. He helped me. He helped you because he's losing control of the project, Lena said. He's not a villain, Avery. He's a scientist who crossed a line, convinced himself he was serving the greater good. But the corporation doesn't see him as an asset anymore. They see him as a liability. And Sam? Lena's eyes darkened. Sam is different. She's not here for research. She's here for containment. Her job is to prevent leaks, keep the workers compliant, ensure that anyone who gets too close to the truth ends up relocated before they can talk. A shiver crawled down my spine. She's been watching me since I arrived. She watches everyone, Lena said. But she watches the curious ones more. The lantern flickered, casting shadows that danced along the cabin walls. For a moment, the shadows seemed to elongate unnaturally, stretching across the room like reaching hands. I blinked hard, and they snapped back to normal. Not hallucinations. Not hallucinations. I repeated it like a mantra, but the tremor in my stomach said differently. What's actually in the forest? I asked, needing something concrete, something that wasn't corporate corruption or psychological manipulation. Lena looked toward the window again. I don't know what they are, she said. The scientists don't either. They're not animals. They're not human. But they respond to the same electromagnetic fields we do, only more intensely. And they mimic people? They mimic what they sense, she corrected. Voices, movement, sometimes even memories, if the exposure is strong enough. They're not malicious. They're curious. But curiosity becomes dangerous when it's mixed with instinct. A distant branch snapped outside, too heavy, too intentional. Lena lowered her voice. They don't understand boundaries, or fear, or human fragility. They only understand attraction, meaning the more attention you give them, she whispered, the closer they come. The cabin felt smaller suddenly, walls inching closer. My hands tightened around her journal. So, what's the corporation trying to do with all this? I asked. My voice sounded brittle even to myself. Some believe the anomalies can be weaponized, Lena said. If you can manipulate perception, you can control fear. And if you can control fear, you can control people. And the creatures? They're an unintended byproduct, she said. Something they discovered by accident and now can't get rid of. Footsteps passed outside, slow, deliberate. Lena's eyes widened. I moved toward the lantern to blow it out, but she stopped me with a hand. Too late, she whispered. Stay still. The footsteps grew closer. Snow crunched softly, measured, then stopped right outside our window. Silence. My pulse hammered so loudly it felt like the whole cabin vibrated. A shadow stretched across the thin curtain, tall, motionless. Avery. Lena mouthed silently. Don't move. Another shadow appeared, smaller, closer to the ground, 2 figures, both still. Then light tapping on the glass. Not claws, not nails, knuckles. A perfect imitation of a human knock. Tap, tap, tap. Avery, a voice whispered through the window. Soft, familiar. My mother's voice. Avery, honey, open the door. Every nerve ending in my body screamed. Lena grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin. It recognizes emotional memory, she breathed. Don't look, don't speak. The tapping continued. My mother's voice softened, coaxing, begging. Avery, please. I need you. I shut my eyes. Hard, because if I opened them, if I even glanced toward the window, something inside me knew it would be over. After a full minute, maybe 2, the voice stopped. The shadows slid away. The snow softened under their retreating steps. Only then did Lena exhale, trembling. That, she whispered, is why the rules exist. I tightened my grip on her journal, feeling its weight again. And that, she added, voice shaking, is why we have to find Mason before they move someone else. Lena didn't sleep after the shadows left. I don't think she even blinked for a solid minute. She kept staring at the curtain as though the thing outside might slip back into our world through the fibers alone. Eventually, she stood, paced the length of the cabin twice, then sat across from me and opened her mouth like she wanted to explain everything. But the explanation didn't come. Instead, she said something else. We can't stay here much longer. Not a suggestion, a fact. A declaration built out of fear sharpened into resolve. You said Mason was taken, I whispered. You think he's still alive? She hesitated. Yes, she finally said. But not for long. The way she said it made the cold in the cabin seem suddenly personal. Alive, watching. She took her journal back from me and flipped through pages filled with diagrams, timestamps, notes, written in tight, precise handwriting. Each page catalogued part of the camp's inner workings, shift rotations that didn't match logging needs, unexplained equipment shipments, strange electromagnetic readings mapped over the forest like invisible currents. And then she stopped at a page marked with a small, torn corner. This, she said, tapping the entry, is the night Mason disappeared. I was in the observation cabin. My role was to document environmental variables, sleep disturbances, stress indicators. I wasn't supposed to interact with anyone directly. Weren't supposed to, I thought. But that evening, she continued, the sensors detected a spike in Sector 9. a reading higher than anything we'd seen in months. I checked the logs, thinking it was equipment malfunction. It wasn't. She turned the page to a grid. A map, one red circle pulsed on the north quadrant. Mason was there, she said. He shouldn't have been. He knew that sector was restricted after dark. Restricted because of the anomalies? I asked. Restricted because of the creatures? She corrected softly. That night, 2 of them moved closer to camp than ever before. They don't attack. They don't hunt. They don't understand intent. But their presence can amplify the effects of the field. And that's when Mason was taken? No, she said. That's when he was found. I stared at her, confused. Found by who? A new voice answered from the doorway. By the people who were supposed to protect him. Both of us jumped. Elias stood just inside the cabin, snow clinging to his boots and jacket. He locked the door behind him before either of us could speak. How long have you been outside? I demanded, keeping my voice low. Long enough to hear something no man should ever hear, he said. Voices that don't belong to anyone living. He rubbed his hands together, but it wasn't from the cold. It was the kind of nervous motion men use when they're close to panic but trying to hide it. I saw 2 figures move across the east clearing on my way here, he said. They didn't leave footprints. A chill rolled through me. I thought they only mimicked voices, I whispered. They mimic what they need to mimic, Elias said, eyes narrowing. Sometimes that means footsteps, sometimes a face, sometimes just the shape of one. Lena inhaled sharply. They've never come that close before. That's because someone's drawing them in, Elias said. Someone who knows the field patterns and how to manipulate them. I didn't have to ask who he meant. Sam, I said. Elias nodded once. She thinks Mason's disappearance compromised the project. And after tonight, I think she's preparing to move another worker. He looked directly at me when he said it. Why me? I asked. You asked questions after your first night, Lena said. You challenged Malcolm. You left your cabin after dark. You met Rowan. The corporation doesn't want curious people. They want compliant ones. People who break easily. And you're a perfect candidate, Elias added grimly. Intelligent, financially desperate, emotionally isolated. It should have felt insulting. Instead, it felt like someone had read my most vulnerable traits out loud. So what's the plan? I asked. Run? No, Elias said firmly. Running won't work. Not at night. Not through that forest. Then what? We fight the truth with truth, Lena said, tapping her journal. We uncover what really happened to Mason, and then we expose them. My instinct recoiled. This wasn't some simple labor dispute or corrupt supervisor. This was a corporation performing illegal experiments in a remote wilderness, and they already had mechanisms in place for making people disappear. How do we even start? I asked. Lena turned her journal to another page. A sketch of the camp's perimeter. 2 buildings circled in red. The facility Malcolm calls storage, and the one Sam calls maintenance. Neither match the blueprints for a logging camp. The generators they run aren't for lights. They're for shielding. Shielding from the anomalies, Elias added. More than that, Lena said. Shielding to confuse the creatures, keep them distracted, but when the power dips, they come closer. Elias finished. And tonight? I asked. Lena's eyes held a quiet dread. Tonight, the power dipped. That's why they came to your window. Her words hollowed the space inside my chest. And what about Rowan? I asked. He said someone was reporting to the corporation. Rowan is a scientist, not a spy, Lena said. But he's scared, too scared to act alone, too scared to defy Sam. Elias leaned forward. And that means we need to move before he decides protecting himself is more important than protecting you. I stared at the 2 of them, Lena, haunted and precise. Elias, hardened but afraid in a way he tried to hide, and something shifted inside me. A resolve I didn't know was still in me. If we're going after Mason, I said, where do we start? Elias pointed to the sketch. Sector 9, he said. The room went silent. Even the wind outside softened, as if listening. That's where he disappeared, Lena added. And that's where the readings first went off the charts. Are you both insane? I whispered. That's where the creatures were strongest. Elias met my gaze without flinching. That's why we'll find answers there, he said. Answers the corporation didn't want anyone to see. He stepped toward the door, listening carefully before unlocking it. We leave before sunrise, he said. First light. When the creatures retreat deepest into the trees. Lena closed her journal, a finality in the sound. And whatever you do, she said quietly, don't look back when we cross the boundary. I didn't ask why, because for the first time since I arrived at camp, I understood that some answers were worse than ignorance. Dawn came late in the Yukon. The sky bruised into a faint gray long before the sun actually surfaced, but even that thin light felt like a blessing after the night we'd endured. I hadn't slept. Lena didn't either. Elias stayed outside our door most of the night, leaning against the cabin wall with a thermos of bitter coffee and a look that suggested he'd seen far too many nights like this one. When first light finally crept over the tree line, we packed quietly, no words wasted, no unnecessary sounds. The forest outside felt too alert, like it hadn't slept either. Every branch seemed to lean inward. Every shadow felt stretched thin from waiting. Elias motioned us to follow. Stay close. No talking until we clear the south boundary. Lena slipped her journal inside her coat and nodded. I followed them into the brittle morning air, boots sinking into snow that crackled like glass. My breath plumed white and hung in the cold for too long before fading. Sector 9 lay east of camp, beyond a stretch of tall pines, where the trees thinned into a marsh-like basin. The forest there had a reputation among the workers, a kind of whispered superstition everyone denied believing in, but still avoided without explanation. Someone once jokingly called it the Hollow. No one laughed at the name. We crossed the main path without speaking, heading into the narrow corridor of trees that marked the boundary line. Elias stopped and held up a hand. Once we're across, he whispered, walk forward. Don't turn around. Don't respond to anything behind you, not footsteps, not voices, not even your name. Lena's breath hitched. She understood the rule better than I did. Elias stepped forward first. He didn't look back. We followed. The moment my foot crossed the line between forest and boundary, the world changed. The air grew thicker. Sound dampened. My own footsteps sounded muffled, swallowed. The trees seemed to lean inward, as though listening. A low hum pulsed beneath the ground, vibrating faintly through the soles of my boots. It felt like walking across a living lung. Every instinct screamed at me to stop. Just keep moving, Lena whispered, her voice barely audible. This is where the field is strongest. The deeper we moved, the more wrong everything became. The sunlight dimmed even though the sky was clear. No birds, no wind, just the quiet thrum of something too large and unseen moving below the earth. A faint crunch of snow behind us made my spine snap straight. Elias kept walking. Lena didn't turn, but I felt a presence behind us. Not rushing, not stalking, just following, matching our pace with slow deliberation, as if curious. Then came a whisper, Avery. My name drifted through the trees, soft as breath. Too soft for a person, too soft for anything with lungs. I stared forward, jaw clenched so tight, I tasted blood. Avery. Wait. The voice mimicked something almost tender, a coaxing, careful sound meant to tug at emotion rather than fear. Do not turn around, I repeated silently, not for any reason. The whisper rose again, closer this time. Why are you running? Running? I wasn't running. I was barely breathing. Elias slowed and motioned for us to kneel behind a fallen spruce, its trunk split open by lightning. We crouched, breaths shallow, hearts pounding loud enough to echo in the hollow quiet. Elias leaned in. That wasn't one of them, he whispered. That was something else. Lena swallowed hard. The mimicry is evolving. Evolving? I hissed. She nodded. They're responding to proximity. The longer they're near us, the more precisely they imitate. And now? I whispered. Now they imitate motivation. My stomach twisted. Motivation. Not just copying words, copying intent, mimicking emotion, learning persuasion. A branch snapped behind us, slow, heavy. We froze. The sound moved left, then right, circling lazily, as if testing us. Then quiet. Too quiet. Elias rose just enough to peer over the log, his face drained of color. When he dropped back down beside us, his voice was a strained whisper. There are two. Cold sweat slid down my spine. How close? Lena asked. Close enough to smell our breath. She closed her eyes. We need to move now. We can't outrun them, Elias said. We're not outrunning them, Lena answered. We're outsmarting them. She pointed toward the marsh ahead, a long stretch of frozen earth with tall reeds poking through the ice. That's where Mason vanished, she said. That's where we'll vanish too, Elias snapped. No, she said. It's where the field is weakest at dawn. That's why Mason went there. He wasn't drawn in, he was trying to stay clear. Her voice shifted from fear to certainty. Purpose. Something she'd been holding on to since he disappeared. If the creatures follow patterns like I believe they do, she whispered, they won't cross into the basin. It disrupts them. How do you know? I asked. She opened her journal to a page marked with a smear of dirt and what looked like a fingerprint. Mason's last entry, she said. He wrote, "The marsh is quiet, the only quiet place." Elias cursed under his breath. If he wrote that, why didn't you tell anyone? Lena's expression hardened. I did. I told Rowan, and he told Sam. The implication hit all of us at once. And then, she added, the next morning Mason was gone. Silence fell over us. A heavy, suffocating silence filled with realization. Sam knew, and she used that knowledge. Elias's jaw clenched. We need to move. Now. We rose slowly, keeping low, and sprinted toward the marsh. The ground shifted beneath our feet, the ice groaning, reeds snapping under our boots. Behind us, the crunching footsteps quickened, not running, but closing distance with an unnatural glide. A shallow mist hung over the marsh's surface. It shimmered faintly, like heat rising off desert asphalt. Lena motioned us into a crouch. Stay in the mist. They avoid sensory distortion. The mist distorts them? I asked. No, she said. It distorts us. Before I could question that, a shadow lunged from the tree line behind us, tall, elongated, a silhouette stretched too thin, too tall, its movement smooth and jerky at the same time, like a puppet guided by an unseen hand. A second shape followed, smaller, darting between the reeds with unnatural fluidity. We backed deeper into the mist. The creatures slowed, wavered. Their forms flickered like broken projections. They can't see us clearly, Lena whispered. Just keep still. The taller creature tilted its head, imitating curiosity with terrifying precision. It stepped closer, but stopped at the mist's edge, swaying like a silhouette made of smoke. The smaller one inhaled sharply, a sound that didn't belong to any mammal on Earth. Then both stepped back, both retreated, both vanished. Only when the forest was silent again did Elias whisper, "This is where Mason left his last tracks. Right where you're standing." I swallowed hard. So where did he go? I asked. Lena pointed toward a cluster of reeds flattened in a perfect circle. He went down, she whispered, into whatever's beneath this marsh. The flattened circle of reeds looked ordinary at first glance. Snow dusted the edges, and frost clung to the stems like silver veins. But the longer I stared at it, the more wrong it seemed, too perfectly shaped, too cleanly pressed, as though the weight that had created it wasn't a body, but something heavier, something deliberate. Elias crouched beside it, brushing away a thin layer of frost to reveal the dark earth beneath. His expression hardened. "These aren't boot prints," he said. "No," Lena whispered. "The ground collapsed here. I felt the marsh breathe beneath my boots. A faint shift, a subtle give, as if something hollow and enormous waited just beneath the surface." "So Mason fell through?" I asked. Lena shook her head. "He climbed." "How do you know?" She turned another page in her journal, showing a crude but deliberate drawing a circle with arrows downward. Mason sketched this the night before he disappeared, she said. He wasn't running from something. He was heading towards something. Something he thought might explain the anomalies. Elias glanced at the horizon where the sun struggled to break through the trees. Whatever's under here, he said slowly. We don't have much time before the field shifts again. Lena nodded. Mid-morning spike. The field intensifies after sunrise. If we're still here when that happens, we won't be, I finished. Elias tested the ground with his boot. It sagged, then firmed again like a stretched hide. It's thin, he said. Probably a crust formed over open space. One wrong step, and the ground cracked beneath him. I lunged and grabbed his jacket just as his left leg plunged through the marsh. A hollow echo rose from below, as if the earth had swallowed his boot whole. Don't move, I barked. Elias gritted his teeth, struggling to keep balance while the ground shifted in a slow, ominous ripple beneath him. Lena scrambled to help, grabbing his arm as we pulled him back onto firmer ground. The marsh groaned, settling. The perfect circle sagged. It's a sinkhole, Elias said breathlessly. A deep one. No, Lena whispered, crouching low. It's an entrance. The air around us seemed to tighten. The wind vanished completely, leaving a suffocating stillness in its wake. Entrance to what? I asked. Lena looked up at me, eyes bright with fear and certainty. The old mining tunnels. Elias stiffened. Those were sealed in the 80s. Landslides collapsed the whole system. Not all of it, she said. The corporation used the old shafts as infrastructure when they built the research facility. They wanted a way to monitor the anomalies from underground. My heart pounded. So Mason went down there. Lena nodded. And the corporation went after him. Elias wiped frost from his beard. If Mason found one of the old tunnels, we need to locate the entrance before Sam realizes we're out here. I scanned the marsh, searching for anything that looked deeper than it should, any sign of human interference. The reeds around the circle sloped downward in a spiral pattern, like something had been dragged across them repeatedly over a long time. What if someone else already knows we're out here? I said quietly. Lena looked up. You think Sam's tracking us? No, I said. I think Rowan is. Even as the words left my mouth, something echoed across the marsh. A metallic clink, then another. Elias swore under his breath. Someone's moving equipment. Not someone, Lena said. Look. Through the fog, a figure emerged, moving slowly, carefully, carrying something long and metal over their shoulder. The daylight sharpened just enough for me to make out their face. Rowan Hale. His glasses were fogged, his steps uneven, like he'd been awake for days. When he spotted us kneeling near the sinkhole, he froze. Avery, he called, voice cracking. Lena? Elias stood. Rowan, what are you doing out here? Rowan hesitated. He tightened his grip on the metal rod in his hand. It looked like a ground-penetrating sensor, not a weapon. But his posture was defensive in a way that unsettled me. I should ask you the same, he said, voice thin. Sector 9 is restricted. You shouldn't be here. You're here, I said. That's different, he said quickly. Too quickly. Lena stepped forward. Rowan, did you know about the tunnels beneath the marsh? Did you send Mason down there? Rowan's shoulders slumped, and in that single sagging motion, the truth spilled from him. He found something, Rowan whispered. Something the corporation had hidden decades ago. And he documented it. He videoed everything. What was it? I asked. Rowan swallowed hard. His breath trembled in the cold air. A chamber, he said. One of the original excavation sites. It's where the anomalies originate. He closed his eyes, voice shaking. Something down there moved. Elias cursed. Moved? What moved? The rock? No. Rowan's voice cracked. The field. What does that mean? I pressed. He stared at me, eyes hollow. It means the magnetic anomalies aren't geological. They're organic. The marsh fell silent. Even the wind refused to breathe. I stepped closer. Rowan, where's Mason? He shook his head slowly. I tried to stop them. I tried to keep him from going down. But Sam told them to relocate him before he could upload the footage. And what about now? Lena whispered. Where is he now? Rowan didn't answer. He didn't have to. His silence told us everything. The corporate team had already moved Mason, or whatever was left of him. I felt anger burn hot in my chest. Then we go down there, now. Rowan stepped forward sharply. No, you don't understand. The deeper tunnels amplify the anomalies. If you go down without shielding, you won't come back the same. What's the same? Elias demanded. Rowan flinched. Your memory, your perception, your mind. Lena stepped between us. Rowan, if we don't find Mason, this ends the way it ended before with relocations and disappearances. How many more names do you want on your wall? His face twisted. Not with guilt, with grief. I didn't want any of this, he whispered. Then help us, I said. Show us where the tunnel entrance is. He stared at me a long moment. Then he lifted the metal sensor and pointed toward the circle of reeds. Here, he said, but it won't hold for long. Elias knelt at the edge. How do we get down without collapsing the entire marsh? Rowan glanced around, then pointed toward a cluster of stunted spruce trees 10 feet away. There, he said. The ground is more stable. We anchor ropes and descend from that angle. But once we're down, he trailed off. Once we're down, I pressed. He met my eyes, voice barely a whisper. Once we're down, we're not alone. A gust of wind tore across the marsh. Not natural, not random. A warning. The creatures were close again. Too close. We need to go, Elias said. Now. I grabbed the rope in Rowan's pack as he unspooled it with shaking hands. The marsh groaned beneath us. Somewhere beyond the tree line, a long, low sound echoed a mimic's attempt at a human call. But this time, it didn't use a familiar voice. It used mine. Avery. Rowan's eyes widened. They're adapting faster than I expected. Lena tightened her gloves. Then we don't have time to be afraid. I nodded, heart pounding as we prepared to descend into the dark mouth of the marsh. Mason had gone down looking for the truth. We were going down to drag him back from it, if he was still down there at all. The rope creaked as Elias anchored it to the base of a twisted spruce, its roots gripping the earth like claws. The marsh stretched around us in a pale circle of frost and reeds, the air shimmering slightly with the faint residual mist. It felt as if we were standing at the mouth of something ancient, something that had waited a long time for us to find it. Rowan double-checked the knot with trembling fingers. Not the shaking of cold, something deeper. Fear, guilt, maybe both. When he finally spoke, his voice was tight. Once you're below the crust, it drops fast. 20 feet straight down into the old ventilation chamber. Watch your footing. The ground down there isn't stable. Elias tested the rope with a tug. Good enough. I tried to calm my breathing, but every inhale felt shallow. The marsh seemed alive beneath my boots, pulsing faintly with each breath I took. Like something below responded to every small movement above. Lena adjusted her gloves, her expression steady but pale. I'll go last. Avery goes second. I should go first, I said. Mason is. You're not leading this descent, Elias cut in. The first person down needs experience with unstable ground. You don't have that. I do. I hated that he was right. Elias wrapped the rope around his wrist and took the first step over the edge. The ground dipped under his weight, cracked, then held. Slowly, he lowered himself into the sinkhole, boots sliding against the loose soil as he descended into darkness. Clear, he called after a moment. My turn. My palms were slick with sweat despite the freezing air. I wrapped the rope around my forearm the way Elias showed me earlier, securing each grip before shifting my weight. The marsh wall crumbled beneath me, dirt cascading silently into the void below. I lowered myself inch by inch. The light from above dimmed quickly. After 10 feet, the cold intensified. After 15, the air changed thicker, metallic, tinged with something that smelled like wet stone and old machinery. When my boots finally hit solid ground, a muted echo traveled up through the cavern. Elias steadied me with one hand. "You okay?" he asked. "Ask me when we're back on the surface." He didn't smile. He didn't even try. Lena descended next, moving more quickly than I expected. She landed lightly, her gaze sweeping the cavern like she was cataloging every detail. Rowan followed last, grunting as he lowered himself down with far less grace. The space around us was wider than I'd imagined, an old mining chamber carved roughly into the earth. Rusted rail tracks split the ground beneath our feet, leading deeper into a tunnel where faint vibrations pulsed through the walls. The ceiling arched low, dotted with stalactite-like mineral formations that glistened faintly. "It's bigger than I thought," I whispered. "It extends for miles," Rowan said. "These tunnels connect to the original Yukon copper mines. The corporation repurposed them decades ago when they first discovered the anomaly." Lena scanned the tunnel walls with her flashlight. "The field is fluctuating down here." "Stronger. Stronger how?" I asked. She didn't answer with words. She simply turned the flashlight off. The darkness swallowed us instantly, and then faint ripples of pale blue light flickered across the walls. Not like electric sparks, not like reflections. More like veins beneath translucent skin, pulsing with their own rhythm. I stepped closer, breath fogging. "What is that?" Rowan exhaled shakily. "The anomaly. This is where the signature is strongest. It reacts to electromagnetic interference. But sometimes, it reacts to us." "Us how?" Elias asked. Rowan hesitated. "Emotion." A low hum filled the chamber, rising in a soft crescendo that made my bones ache. It felt like pressure building behind my eyes. The walls pulsed again, brighter this time. Lena turned her flashlight back on quickly. The hum quieted. "Don't stand in darkness," she said. "Not down here. It responds to attention, curiosity, focus." Elias looked at Rowan sharply. "What did Mason discover?" Rowan looked toward the deeper tunnel, where the old mine tracks disappeared into a long, sloping passage. "He found a chamber," he whispered. "A place where the anomaly becomes structured, organized." "Organized?" I echoed. "Yes," Rowan said, "as though the energy itself aligns into patterns. Mason believed it wasn't natural." Elias frowned. "Meaning what? That something built it?" Rowan nodded slowly. "And when he recorded the footage, whatever the camera captured, Sam ordered his relocation immediately." A cold, heavy knot tightened in my chest. "Was Mason alive when they took him?" I asked. Rowan's face went ashen. "Yes, but after prolonged exposure, people don't always come back the same." "What does that mean?" Lena answered instead. "Memory loss, identity disorientation, paranoia, hallucinations that persist even when the person leaves the field." I swallowed. Hard. "So Mason might not even know who he is." "Or worse," Rowan whispered. "He might remember too much." Before I could respond, a soft, rhythmic sound echoed from deep within the tunnel. Tap, tap, tap. The three of us froze. "That's metal," Elias whispered. "Something tapping against the rails." Rowan's breath trembled. "It's too early for the maintenance crew to be down here." Lena's flashlight beam quivered slightly. "It's not a crew." The tapping grew slower. Closer. Tap, tap. A cold wave slid down my spine. The sound wasn't random. It had intention, pattern, like someone trying to send a signal. Elias raised a hand. "Lights off." "Quiet." "No," Rowan began, but the lights went out. Darkness crashed around us, thick like a physical force. And then something glowed down the tunnel. A faint figure, pale, humanoid, standing perfectly still. At first, I thought it was a reflection, some trick of phosphorescent minerals. But then the head tilted, jerking slightly off-center, like a puppet testing its string. My breath stopped. "Avery." The whisper came from behind us. But the glowing figure was in front. Two voices, two sources, two presences. One mimicking my name from the darkness behind us. One standing in the tunnel ahead, swaying gently like it didn't fully understand how to balance. Lena grabbed my wrist with icy fingers. "That's not the creatures," she whispered. "That's a person?" I breathed. "Maybe," she said. "Or what's left of one." Elias's voice dropped to a razor-thin whisper. "Everyone turn your lights back on, now." 3 beams flicked on at once. The tunnel ahead was empty, but the tapping continued, this time right behind us. Rowan went rigid. "They're not supposed to be this far down." Lena's voice broke. "Then something's changed. The anomaly is shifting." Elias drew in a slow breath. "We follow the tapping," he said. "Whatever it is, it knows where Mason went." Rowan shook his head violently. "No, absolutely not. It could be anything. A mimic, a hallucination, a lure. And Mason was alone when he heard it," Elias said. "That's why he followed it. That's why he left clues." I stepped toward the deeper tunnel. My pulse hammered in my ears. "If he followed it," I said, "then so do we." Somewhere in the chamber behind us, something exhaled, a sound not made by lungs. The rope above swayed gently as though brushed by unseen movement. Rowan's eyes flicked up. "We're not alone down here." "No," Elias said, "we're not." And then we moved deeper into the mine toward the tapping, toward the unknown, toward where Mason's last footprints had disappeared into the dark, toward answers no one in the camp wanted us to survive long enough to understand. The tunnel narrowed as we moved deeper, the ceiling dropping low enough that Elias had to duck with each step. Our flashlight beams jittered across the rock walls, catching glints of moisture and old drill marks carved decades ago. The air grew colder, but not the crisp, natural cold of the Yukon. This was deeper, thicker, almost metallic, like chilled iron pressed against the inside of my lungs. The tapping guided us like a beacon. Tap, tap, tap. Always just far enough ahead to keep us moving. Always close enough that stopping felt like an invitation for whatever followed us to close the distance. The sound echoed strangely underground, sometimes sharp, sometimes distant and muffled, as though bouncing through several layers of tunnels we couldn't see. Lena kept glancing behind us. "There's something else down here," she whispered. Elias nodded without looking back. "I hear it too." And I did. Eventually, the faint scrape of something dragging softly across stone. It didn't match our footsteps, or the tapping. Something shadowing us, something patient. Rowan stayed close behind me, muttering under his breath. His composure had crumbled the moment we entered the mines. Every 10 steps, he mumbled calculations, reminders, warnings to himself, like a man trying not to unravel. "We shouldn't be here," he murmured again. We shouldn't have come down without proper shielding. The frequencies are too strong, too variable." "Quiet," Elias hissed. "Unless you want the whole underground to hear you." Rowan snapped his mouth shut, but fear continued leaking through his eyes. After 5 more minutes of walking, the tunnel widened abruptly into a cavern. A collapsed ventilation shaft yawned open above us, letting in a thin beam of grey daylight that pierced the gloom like a spotlight. Dust glittered in the air, drifting lazily in the cold. But something else was in the cavern. Tracks, boot prints, deep, fresh, leading toward the far side. I knelt beside them, heart pounding. "These are human." Lena crouched beside me. "And recent. Within the last day." "Mason?" I asked. "Maybe," she said. "Or someone following him." Rowan pointed toward the far end, where a narrow passage dipped downward. "That leads to the secondary chamber. It's where Mason recorded the footage." Elias turned sharply. "What footage?" Rowan hesitated, deliberated, then exhaled with trembling resolve. "He filmed something in the chamber, something the corporation never wanted documented." "What?" Lena demanded. Rowan swallowed hard. "The origin of the anomaly." I felt cold creep up my arms. "You mean the thing generating the magnetic fields?" "Yes," he whispered, "but not generating, amplifying." A low vibration rippled through the floor. Not from machinery, something deeper, older. The tapping stopped. Total silence. "Why did it stop?" I whispered. Lena adjusted her flashlight, scanning the cavern walls. Because whatever was leading us here wants us to listen. To what? Elias asked. Rowan pointed at the rock wall near the downward passage. There, look. Faint markings stretched across the stone, scratches, grooves, impressions that didn't look like mining tools or erosion. They curved in spirals, looping patterns that made my vision swim if I stared too long. What are those? I asked. Not human, Rowan said quietly. And not natural. His voice cracked. They've been here longer than the mines. A soft breeze whispered through the cavern impossible, since there were no openings besides the collapsed vent above. But the air shifted, brushing past my neck like a breath. And then, tap, right behind us. I spun, flashlight slicing through the darkness. No one was there, but Elias's expression darkened. That wasn't rock. That was bone. The scrape that followed confirmed it. A long, dragging sound, drawing a pattern on stone. We tightened our formation instinctively, Elias and I at the front, Lena and Rowan behind. The beam of light above shifted slightly as clouds moved overhead, plunging part of the cavern into deeper shadow. Whatever happens, Elias said quietly, we keep moving. Toward the chamber. We moved toward the downward passage. The air grew warmer, thicker with humidity. Drops of water plinked lazily from the ceiling. Halfway down, Lena froze. There, she whispered. A slab of stone leaned against the wall. On it, in dirt and charcoal, someone had scrawled a message. Don't follow it. Follow the light. My breath caught. Mason wrote this, Lena said, voice trembling. He used charcoal from a burned support beam. Rowan shook his head violently. This isn't possible. No one could think coherently after that level of exposure. Unless they fought through it, Elias said. Unless they knew exactly what the corporation was doing to them. I ran my fingers across the message. It was rushed, desperate, written by someone on the edge of losing himself but clinging to the last threads of clarity. Something scratched against rock behind us. Slow, deliberate, not tapping, tracing, as though something was copying the message on the wall. We moved faster, descending into the narrowing tunnel. The walls pulsed faintly again with electromagnetism, a soft, rhythmic beat that made my skin tingle. The passage curved abruptly and opened into a chamber so large it stole the breath from my lungs. The ceiling arched 30 feet above us, streaked with veins of shimmering mineral. The floor dipped into a bowl-shaped depression, filled with water so still it reflected our flashlights like a mirror. At the far end of the chamber stood a metal scaffold, corporate equipment, a camera mount, an extraction winch, a cluster of abandoned instruments that hummed faintly with residual charge. But none of that was what held my attention. Something moved beneath the water. Not swimming, not rising. Shifting, like a shadow trapped under glass, Lena gasped. This is what Mason found. Rowan's breath hitched. This is the heart of the anomaly. Elias lowered his flashlight, voice cracking. Then where the hell is Mason? A soft ripple formed at the water's edge. A hand broke the surface, human, pale, trembling, and a voice raw, hoarse, but unmistakably human whispered, "Help. Me." Lena clamped a hand over her mouth. Rowan staggered backward. Elias grabbed my arm. "Do not move." The hand stretched upward, weak and shaking. "Please." My heart slammed against my ribs. I stepped closer, unable to stop myself. "Avery, no," Elias hissed. But the voice came again, louder this time, more desperate. "Avery, please." My blood turned to ice. It knew my name, and I didn't know if it was Mason, or something that had learned his voice. The hand trembled just above the water's surface. Fingers splayed as if reaching for anything, anyone. Ripples spread outward in concentric circles, disturbing the otherwise perfect stillness. Every instinct in me screamed to run, to retreat back into the tunnel, to put as much distance as possible between myself and that chamber. But something deeper, more primal held me in place. "Avery," Elias whispered sharply, "don't take another step. You don't know what you're seeing." But I knew, or at least I wanted to believe I did. "Mason?" I whispered, my voice echoing softly across the shimmering pool. The hand flinched, not like a reflex, like recognition. Avery. Lena grabbed my arm. Stop. Listen to me. The anomaly mimics voices. It adapts. It could be anything down there, or it could be him, I said. Elias moved forward and planted himself between me and the pool. No, not until we know what we're dealing with. Rowan stepped closer to the scaffold, his face drained of color. The chamber reacts to emotional cues. If it senses distress, even hope, it amplifies the signal. You can't trust anything here. The hand slipped beneath the surface, then rose again, slower this time, weaker, as though its owner was fading. Don't leave. The way it said it, so human, so broken, hit something in my chest I'd been holding rigid since the moment Mason disappeared. If he was alive, if he was even partially conscious, then every second we hesitated was another second he suffered beneath this nightmare. Rowan, I said, did Mason come down here alive? Rowan hesitated, and in that hesitation, I heard the truth. Yes, he whispered. That was enough. I pushed around Elias and took a step toward the pool's edge. Avery. Elias grabbed for me, but I slipped free. The water's surface trembled as I approached, as if responding to my presence. For a moment, I saw my own reflection fractured and distorted, multiple versions of myself rippling outward like echoes. Then something else appeared beside the reflection. A face, hollow eyes, pale skin, floating just beneath the surface, not lifeless. Watching Mason, I whispered again, but when the eyes blinked, I froze. The blink was too slow, too deliberate, too wrong. Elias yanked me back by the collar so hard I nearly fell. That's not him, he snapped. Look at the eyes. I did, and I saw it. The pupils didn't react to the light. They expanded and contracted like breathing lungs. Organic, but not human. Lena's voice cracked. The anomaly is mimicking form, constructing shape based on whatever memory it pulled from Mason. Meaning Mason was here, Elias said. But that thing, whatever it is, isn't him. The water swirled violently. The pale figure beneath the surface twisted in a serpentine motion that made my stomach flip. The hand that had reached for me re-emerged, but now it was joined by another. Then another. Stay, stay, stay. 3 voices overlapped. All wrong, all discordant. Like a choir of broken radios layered on top of one another. Rowan stumbled backward, knocking over a metal case. It's forming structures, responding to our presence. We need to leave now. But as he said it, a metallic clang echoed behind us. Something had fallen in the tunnel. Then a footstep. Slow, heavy. Elias turned, flashlight sweeping the tunnel entrance. Something followed us down, he whispered. The water rippled aggressively behind us, the distorted figures rising higher, their shapes blurring like reflections in a warped mirror. The air thrummed with electromagnetic distortion that made my teeth ache. We were trapped. Something in the chamber, something in the tunnel. The rail beneath my boots vibrated. Not from the water, from the tunnel. Lena's breath hitched, and she pointed with a shaking hand. A figure stood at the tunnel's mouth. Human silhouette, broad shoulders, still as stone. Mason? I whispered again, my voice fragile. The figure didn't move, not even to breathe. Then the light hit its face, and my stomach dropped. It was a mask of skin, not worn grown, stretched over a shape too angular to be human bone. The mouth opened, slowly, too slowly. Re. Elias shoved me behind him. That's a mimic. Rowan nearly collapsed. No, this close to the chamber? It shouldn't be able to hold a form outside the pool. This isn't possible. But it was approaching, one deliberate step at a time. Each movement learning from the previous one, growing more fluid, more human. The chamber behind us boiled, dozens of hands reaching toward the air, writhing. We're boxed in, Lena whispered, panic finally bleeding into her voice. No way backward, no way forward, and no way up, not without climbing the rope, which hung 40 feet above in another tunnel entirely. Elias looked around with a soldier's eye, evaluating the structure, the scaffold, the rails, the angles, the distance. "We go higher," he said. "Up the scaffold." Rowan shook his head violently. "The equipment there is unstable. They abandoned it for a reason." "It's metal," Elias snapped. "Metal disrupts the field when charged. If we can overload it." "Overload it how?" I asked. He grabbed a battery pack off the ground, one the researchers must have left behind. "Like this." The mimic stepped closer, its movements growing smoother, more human-like with each shift. Its skin mask twitched as it tried to form an expression, almost a smile. Elias slammed the pack into the metal frame. The chamber screamed. A sound like tearing steel and shattering glass exploded through the cavern. The water convulsed violently, the hands thrashing as the reflection creatures dissolved into streaks of blue-white light. The mimic at the tunnel mouth shrieked, not like a human, like metal twisting under impossible force. The electromagnetic field rippled hard. The ground lurched. Water surged. The cavern shook. Lena grabbed my wrist. "Go! Climb!" Elias climbed first, pulling himself up the scaffold with desperate strength. I followed, heart hammering so violently I could barely breathe. Metal groaned beneath us, and the chamber floor fractured, sending shards of mineral and stone sliding toward the boiling pool below. The mimic lunged. Its body hit the scaffold so hard, the frame bent inward a full foot. I nearly slipped, catching myself at the last second as its hand clawed at my boot. "Avery!" Elias shouted, reaching down. I grabbed his arm, and he hauled me upward with a strength fueled by sheer survival instinct. Below, the mimic twisted, reforming its limbs with sickening fluidity. Its mouth opened again, but the scaffold surged with electrical current as the battery overloaded. The creature convulsed, collapsing into a spray of blue light that dissipated like smoke. The chamber cracked open beneath it. Water drained. Light screamed. The anomaly ruptured. Rowan scrambled up behind Lena just as the scaffold ripped from the floor entirely. "Jump!" Elias yelled. We leapt toward the ledge, a rough shelf of rock protruding from the chamber wall. My hands hit stone. Pain shot through my wrists. Elias grabbed my jacket and pulled me up as the entire chamber collapsed beneath us, swallowing the scaffold, the water, and the creatures in a single deafening roar. Silence followed. Then, a faint voice echoed upward from the depths. Not a mimic, human, weak. "Avery, help." My heart stopped. "Mason," I whispered. Lena's eyes widened. Rowan's breath broke. Elias stared into the darkness. "He's alive," Elias said softly. "He's deeper." I looked at him, and he knew exactly what I was about to say. "I'm going after him." But before we could decide anything, shadows moved above us. Footsteps, voices, men, corporate operatives. We weren't alone. The rescue had just become a manhunt, and we were no longer the hunters. The ledge we clung to was barely wide enough for two boots placed side by side, and the sound of collapsing rock still echoed through the cavern like a distant avalanche. Dust drifted upward from the darkness below, illuminated by the thin beam of my dying flashlight. The air tasted of metal, wet stone, and something faintly electric like the remnants of a storm sealed underground. But it wasn't the collapse beneath us that froze the breath in my lungs. It was the voices above. Corporate operatives, more than one. Their footsteps were controlled, deliberate, echoing down the angled tunnel that led back toward the surface. Lena pressed her back to the jagged wall, breath trembling. "They're blocking the way out." Rowan swallowed hard. They were monitoring the chamber's structural sensors. When the field destabilized, they would have known instantly. Elias scanned the upper tunnel, calculating angles, distance, possibilities like a man whose mind was trained to make life or death decisions in seconds. "They won't risk a firefight in unstable ground. They'll try to take us alive." "For questioning?" I asked. "No," Elias said. "For containment." My stomach twisted. Containment meant disappearance. It meant the same fate they'd intended for Mason, for Josh, for anyone who got too close to the truth. I crawled slightly forward along the ledge, trying to find another exit, a break in the rock, a secondary tunnel, anything. But all I saw was blackness yawning below us and stone walls rising sharply above. "Listen," Lena whispered suddenly. We fell silent. At first, I heard nothing but the distant grind of settling rocks. Then beneath that, another sound. A faint, rhythmic pulse. Not mechanical, not human, organic. It throbbed like a heartbeat in the stone itself. Rowan's face went white. The anomaly isn't gone. The collapse didn't destroy it. It's shifting, Elias cursed under his breath, meaning this place could come down at any moment. A sharp click echoed from the upper tunnel, metal tapping against stone. Then a beam of white light swept across the opposite wall. "They're close," I whispered. Another voice joined them, calm, controlled, chilling in its familiarity. Sam Aldridge, the man who oversaw the relocation orders. The man who had followed Mason's steps through the facility like he was tracking a loose asset, not a human being. His voice carried with cold authority as he walked closer to the chamber entrance. "Spread out. Thermal signatures show 4 bodies at varying depths. 2 stable, 2 elevated heart rates. That means they're conscious." He paused. Stones crunched underfoot. "Containment protocol is now active. Non-lethal until further notice." Non-lethal. For now. Lena's hand found my sleeve. "Avery, Elias is right. They want us alive because we know too much, and because we have something they want," Elias said quietly. His gaze flicked to Rowan, specifically to the pack strapped to his chest. Inside it, research data, mapping files, and the recording Mason had made before his disappearance. Rowan stiffened under the attention. "If they get this data, everything we've done, everything we risked Mason's sacrifice will be erased." "Then we don't let them take it," Lena whispered. "But we had nowhere to go. Unless..." I leaned over the ledge again, shining my flashlight downward. The beam cut through the dust, illuminating moving shadows far below. Not creatures, not water. More like swirling pockets of magnetic distortion made visible by the collapse. And deeper still, I froze. A metallic glint. Something artificial. Something built. "There," I whispered. "Do you see that? At the bottom." Elias squinted. "Looks like a service platform?" Rowan's breath hitched. "The lower research deck." "The what?" Lena asked. Rowan rubbed the back of his neck with shaking fingers. "Years ago, the corporation installed an undocumented platform at the bottom of the original dig. Only senior-level researchers knew about it. It was designed for deep field observation. If Mason is alive, that's where they'd move him." I finished. Elias stared at the vertical descent. "Do we have enough rope?" "No," Rowan said immediately. "And even if we did, the field is stronger down there. You don't understand how risky." "We're going," I said. He turned on me, eyes wild. "Avery, we're going," I repeated, voice steady. "We came for Mason. We're not leaving without him." Above us, Sam's voice commanded his team into position. Thermal scan complete. 3 subjects clustered in the lower right quadrant of the chamber. "Prepare harnesses, descend carefully, and secure all individuals." "They're coming down," Lena whispered. Elias made a decision in an instant. We dropped to the next ledge. "What next ledge?" Rowan hissed. Elias pointed to a narrow outcropping 10 feet below, barely visible through the dust. "That one." "That's not a ledge," Rowan snapped. "That's a mistake." "Maybe," Elias said, "but staying here is death. No time for debate. No time for fear." He slid over the edge before Rowan could protest, gripping jagged stone with one hand and lowering himself onto the outcropping. It held. "Move," he hissed. Lena went next, her breath sharp as she dropped into Elias's waiting grip. The stone groaned but didn't crumble. I followed, hands slick with sweat, despite the cold. The fall wasn't far, but just far enough to break something if I misjudged. I landed, boots skidding slightly before Elias steadied me. Rowan looked down at us, panic twisting his expression. "I can't." "Yes, you can," Elias said sharply. "Jump." Rowan closed his eyes. muttered something unintelligible, and stepped off the ledge. We caught him. Barely. Above us, footsteps reached the chamber. Flashlights off, Elias whispered. Darkness swallowed us whole. A bright beam appeared overhead, sweeping the cavern like a hunting spotlight. They're close. Lena breathed into my ear. Too close. One wrong sound, one flicker of movement, and they would see us clinging to the rock face like insects. Then a pebble skittered down from above, bouncing off Rowan's shoulder. A flashlight immediately swung toward the movement. There, someone shouted. Elias didn't wait. Down, he barked, and together we dropped again, leaving the operatives scrambling above as we plunged toward the deeper tunnels where the anomaly pulsed like a living heart. We didn't fall far, just enough for my stomach to lurch before my boots hit another slanted ridge of stone. This one wasn't a ledge so much as a fractured section of the chamber wall, angled downward like a broken ramp leading deeper into the earth. My knees buckled on impact, and I barely kept myself from sliding into the abyss below. Elias landed beside me with practiced precision, immediately bracing himself between two jutting rocks. Lena hit the slope next, skidding on loose shale before grabbing his arm. Rowan wasn't as lucky. He slammed down hard, losing his footing instantly. Rowan! I lunged, fingers brushing his sleeve just as he slid toward the dark drop below. Elias reacted faster. He grabbed Rowan by the back of his jacket, muscles straining as Rowan's boots scraped helplessly against the slick stone. Put your feet down, Elias grunted. I'm trying, Rowan gasped, his voice cracking with panic. Lena dropped beside them, pressing her boots into the rock to counterbalance their weight. Together, they hauled Rowan back until he collapsed on the ridge, shaking violently. Above us, voices erupted. Movement detected. 2, no, 3 heat signatures shifting down the south wall. Sam's tone cut through the echoes. They're dropping. Shift the team to intercept now. A heavy clang rang out as someone above hooked gear to the chamber's upper support beams. They're deploying harnesses, Lena whispered, which meant they'd be on our level within seconds. Elias flicked his head toward the downward slope. We move, fast. The incline sharpened as we descended, forcing us to slide in short, controlled bursts while gripping jagged rock to slow our momentum. Dust filled the air. The chamber pulsed with faint blue light from the anomaly below, illuminating the stone with an eerie, shifting glow. Every few yards, the ridge narrowed, forcing us to angle sideways or hop to another fractured section. Behind us, a light swept across the wall. They're coming, Rowan choked out. Then don't look back, Elias said. But Rowan did, and when he did, he froze. Not from fear of the operatives, from something else. Avery, he whispered. What is that? His flashlight beam shook in his hand as he pointed upward. I turned. Something clung to the chamber wall above the operatives. At first glance, it resembled a human, long-limbed, pale, humanoid. But its proportions were wrong. Its joints bent slightly the wrong way. The skin shimmered faintly with the same blue-white light pulsing through the rock. It crawled along the wall silently, effortlessly. The operatives didn't see it, but it saw them. Lena clapped a hand over her mouth to stifle a gasp. That's one of the deep mimics. Rowan's voice cracked. It shouldn't be able to form outside the core chamber. It shouldn't even be functional this far from the source. Doesn't matter what it should be. Elias snapped. Move. We scrambled down the slope just as the creature lunged. It hit the wall above the operatives with a sound like wet stone cracking, its limbs splaying out in inhuman angles. The operatives shouted, weapons raised, flashlights jerking wildly. The mimic screamed. Not in pain, in hunger. Its voice reverberated through the chamber in a warped, layered howl that made the air vibrate. The operatives opened fire, bullets sparking off the rock in chaotic bursts of light. The mimic contorted unnaturally, dodging with movements too fluid, too abrupt. Then it dropped onto the nearest operative with terrifying speed. We didn't watch the rest. We ran. The ridge ended abruptly, dropping us into a narrow crevice. Elias slid down first, landing in a crouch. Lena followed, Then me, then Rowan. We found ourselves in a tight vertical chute of rough stone barely wide enough for us to shimmy downward. The sound of gunfire echoed above, swallowed by another shriek, this one deeper, guttural. Then silence. Rowan's breath shook as he slid down beside us. They're dead. Keep moving, Elias said. That's going to draw more. What more? I asked. He met my eyes, jaw set. Whatever lives down here. The chute narrowed further until we had to squeeze sideways, inching downward one breath at a time. My shoulders scraped stone. Loose gravel rained past my boots, vanishing into the darkness below. Elias, Lena whispered. How far does this drop? Long enough that you don't want to slip. Comforting. We descended in suffocating darkness, the air growing thicker and warmer with each foot. My flashlight flickered. Elias's light dimmed. Rowan's cut out entirely. Only Lena's remained strong. We're entering the lower anomaly zone, Rowan breathed, his voice echoing strangely in the tight space. Electromagnetic interference is destabilizing our equipment. We knew that would happen, Elias said. We planned for it. We didn't plan for mimics that can climb walls. Rowan snapped. Rowan, Lena said softly. Yelling won't make the tunnel bigger. He quieted, panting. A soft glow began to rise from below us, pale blue, pulsing, rhythmic. The anomaly, Lena whispered. We're close. How close? I asked. Rowan swallowed. Close enough that prolonged exposure will start to affect cognition. I touched the stone beside me. It vibrated faintly, like the tremor of a distant engine. We slid lower. The chute widened suddenly, dropping us into an open shaft. Elias landed first and motioned for silence. I slid down and hit the stone floor beside him. Then I saw it, the lower research deck, a sprawling platform of metal grating suspended above a pit of swirling blue-white light. Old machinery rusted at its edges. A half-collapsed gantry leaned to one side. Thick cables dangled like vines, some sparking faintly. A soft humming filled the air, not mechanical, biological. And then a voice, weak, strained. Avery. I spun toward the sound. There, lying against a support pillar, was a man. Thin, pale, barely conscious. Mason. His head lifted an inch when he saw us. His cracked lips parted. You came. Emotion slammed into my chest, so hard it almost took my breath away. But before I could take a step toward him, Elias grabbed my arm. Wait, he whispered fiercely. And that's when I saw it. The light behind Mason shifted, like something enormous was moving beneath the platform. Something waking, something aware. At first, I thought the shift in the light was just my eyes struggling with the anomaly's pulse. But no, this was different. The glow behind Mason thickened, shadows folding in on themselves like a tide reversing direction. A wave of blue-white radiance rolled beneath the metal grating, bending its edges upward in a soft, metallic groan. The platform wasn't just vibrating, it was reacting. Elias stepped in front of me. Do not move. The field is changing. Lena shined her flickering flashlight toward the pit below. The beam trembled as its light bent unnaturally curved in ways no physical space should allow. Rowan stumbled backward, his face drained of blood. It's not a singular anomaly. It's a system, a living system. What does that mean? I asked. It means, Rowan whispered, the field isn't a byproduct. It's an organism. A low hum rippled across the metal grating, vibrating in resonance. Mason coughed weakly, trying and failing to push himself upward. Avery, he whispered again. His eyes were sunken, but they were still his, still human. There was recognition there, even through the fog of everything he had endured. Stay still, Elias murmured to him. We're coming. No, Mason croaked, panic surging in his voice. Don't. Step closer. Why? I asked. He shuddered, breathing raggedly. It listens when you move. The platform trembled, as if responding to the vibration of his voice. Lena swallowed. It's reading motion, like sonar. No, Rowan murmured. Worse, it's learning. A groan echoed from above, metal harnesses scraping against stone. The operatives had reached the chamber. Lights flickered across the rock face as they descended on ropes, sweeping far corners with military precision. Elias cursed under his breath. They're coming fast. What do we do? I whispered. We get him, Elias said simply. And we get out. Rowan grabbed his arm. No, look at the deck. It's barely stable. Any sudden movement will. A sharp crack cut him off as a section of the platform bent inward, pulled by some invisible force. Mason winced in pain. It's hungry. The word chilled me. Lena knelt, keeping her body low, analyzing the angles. We need to cross slowly. Distributed weight. No sudden changes. Avery, Elias, and I take the front. Rowan stays close behind us. I'm not staying behind, Rowan said, voice cracking. Elias didn't look at him. You are. And when we move, you stay centered. If anyone loses balance, the whole deck could collapse. Another metallic groan rolled under our boots. We had to move. Now, Elias stepped first, placing his foot in the center of a grating panel. The metal dipped slightly, a soft whine rising beneath it. Lena moved next, balancing carefully. I followed, my heart pounding so loud I could feel the echo in my throat. Every step was agony, an exercise in controlling fear, breath, weight. The rhythm of the anomaly pulsed beneath us, resonating like a living heartbeat. Rowan followed, trembling so hard that Elias had to quietly whisper instructions to keep him from collapsing. Mason watched us approach, tears welling in his eyes. Not from fear, from hope, from the sight of people who hadn't abandoned him the way the corporation had. Avery, he whispered, as if saying my name grounded him. I'm here, I said softly. We're here. Lena reached him first. She dropped to her knees and supported his head. Mason clutched her sleeve weakly. Did you bring them? He rasped. Bring who? She asked. His gaze drifted behind her to Rowan's pack. The evidence, he whispered. What I filmed. What they took me for. It shows everything. Rowan's hand instinctively covered his pack. They're going to kill us for it, he said. Then we don't let them, Elias replied. A sudden clatter cut through the chamber. A rope dropped onto the platform beside us, and a spotlight burned down. The operatives were seconds away from landing. Elias hauled Mason up, throwing his arm around his shoulders. We move as one, now. We turned toward the chute we'd come from until we heard a sound that froze every muscle in my body. A slow, wet scrape. It came from beneath the platform. Lena's breath hitched. It's rising. Rowan's flashlight beam flickered downward, and the blue-white glow beneath the grating coalesced into shapes. Human shapes, but wrong. Faces stretched like melted wax. Arms too long, bodies bending and unbending like figures caught between forms. They weren't mimics in the way we'd understood them. They were embryonic reflections, raw impressions created by the anomaly itself. And they were climbing the underside of the platform. Go! Elias shouted. We moved. The structure lurched sharply as the figures below grabbed hold of the metal. Their hands, if you could call them that, gripped the grating, deforming around it like liquid flesh. Mason cried out in pain as Elias and I supported him. The platform tilted. A beam of tactical light swept across us. There! Sam's voice shouted from above. Do not let them reach the chute. Secure the recording at all costs. Gunfire erupted, bullets sparking off metal and stone. One shot hit the platform, and the metal buckled beneath my foot. I nearly slipped through a gap before Elias yanked me upward. Move, he barked. The anomaly creatures shrieked from below, an unearthly chorus that rippled through bone. The operatives fired blindly into the dark, hitting more of the deck. It wouldn't hold. We were 10 feet from the chute. 8, 5. I shoved Rowan upward first. Lena climbed next, her breath ragged. Elias pushed Mason toward me, and together we lifted him into the narrow passage. Then the platform gave way. A violent crack split the chamber as half the structure collapsed into the abyss below, taking cables, equipment, and several screeching anomaly forms with it. Elias grabbed the edge of the chute with one hand dangling over the drop. "Avery," he shouted. I reached down, grasping his wrist with everything I had. My shoulder nearly dislocated, but I held on. Lena braced my back. Rowan grabbed my belt. Together, we hauled Elias up just as the last of the platform ripped free and fell into the swirling light below. Silence followed, heavy and absolute, except for Mason's faint, pained breathing. We collapsed inside the chute, shaking, gasping, alive. Elias lay on his back, staring at the stone ceiling. "We need to move. They're still above us." But before any of us could shift, Mason whispered something that made my blood run cold. "They won't follow." "Why not?" I asked. His eyes drifted toward the abyss. "Because it's awake now." A deep rumble rolled through the earth, slow, powerful, purposeful. The walls around us vibrated. Dust rained down. Lena gripped my arm. "What do we do?" I looked toward the chute, leading upward toward the operatives who wanted us dead. Toward the surface that held our only chance of exposing everything. "We climb," I said, "and when we reach the surface we run." Elias nodded once. "Then let's finish this." Together, bruised, shaking, but alive, we began the long climb back toward the world above, carrying Mason, the evidence, and the truth that would bring the entire operation crashing down. Behind us, deep in the darkness, the anomaly pulsed again, awakening, learning, listening, and far from finished. When we finally emerged from that underground nightmare cut, shaking, half blind from the cold Yukon sunlight, it didn't feel like survival. It felt like resurfacing after being held underwater for far too long. Lungs burning, mind raw, soul scraped thin. The trees looked different. The air tasted cleaner. The sky felt impossibly wide. And yet, nothing was the same. Not after what we'd seen. Mason lay on the frozen ground beside us, wrapped in Elias's jacket, the winter wind brushing his hollow cheeks. He watched the tree line with the cautious, wounded stare of someone who no longer trusted the quiet. He whispered to me, voice breaking like thin ice. "It follows sound. It remembers. It's not done." I squeezed his hand. "Neither are we. Because trauma doesn't end when you escape it. It ends when you face it and when you expose the things that thrive in silence." Rowan destroyed the tracking chips the corporation had embedded in us. Lena mapped the fault lines beneath the forest, marking the zones where the anomaly pulsed strongest. Elias kept watch, eyes scanning the horizon like he expected corporate operatives or something far older to step out of the trees. And Mason, he was alive, shaken, scarred, changed in ways none of us could fully understand, but alive. For the first time in weeks, he fell asleep without machines humming around him, without metal restraints, without the suffocating hum of the anomaly filling his mind. He slept under an open sky, something he thought he'd never feel again. Later that night, as the stars stretched across the Yukon sky like frozen fire, I sat alone beside the dying campfire. Every pop of burning wood echoed like a memory I couldn't shake. The chamber, the shifting light, the voices that weren't voices at all, and the realization that the forest, this land, held secrets older than any corporation and far more patient. A low tremor rolled beneath the soil, so faint I might have imagined it, but it was enough to raise goosebumps along my arms. Mason stirred in his sleep. Elias looked at me from across the fire, eyes dark and steady. He heard it too. The anomaly hadn't collapsed. It hadn't been destroyed. It had simply awakened. And somewhere deep below the ice and stone, it was listening, not with malice, not with hunger, but with awareness, as if our escape had taught it something new, something dangerous, something human. I stood, staring into the silent black line of the forest. The cold wrapped around me, sharp and sobering, and I realized something I hadn't dared to admit inside those tunnels. We weren't meant to uncover what lay beneath this land, not because it was evil, but because it was powerful, ancient, unfathomable, alive. And the greed of a corporation had poked something that should have been left undisturbed. But now it knows we exist. It knows people fight back. It knows we don't run. It knows we expose the truth when others bury it. And maybe, just maybe, That's what it needed to learn. Not fear, not dominance, but resistance. The world will hear what happened in those tunnels. The truth will spread, whether the corporation wants it to or not. And survivors, people like Mason, and countless others will finally have a voice. I turned back toward the fire, toward my friends, toward the fragile hope we'd fought so hard to reclaim. Survival isn't just making it out alive. It's choosing to keep going afterward, even when the darkness follows you home. And as the wind swept through the pines, carrying a faint, familiar vibration, I felt something settle inside me, not dread, not terror, resolve. Because whatever wakes in the deep Yukon earth, we'll be ready for it. This isn't the end. It's the beginning of a story the world was never meant to hear. And now, they'll never forget it.